Cheers. Within the disability community, there's a great debate on what you call someone in my situation. Is this a handicap? Is it a disability? Am I physically challenged? Do I have special needs? What is it? Well, you can call it whatever you choose to call it. But if you insisted that I give you a word that I think accurately describes my situation, I would have to give you the word condition. You see, I've become convinced through my life and through my travels that every one of us wrestles with some type of a condition in our life. Well, what's a condition? A condition is a basic part of who you are that can sometimes get in your way of living a full, happy, and productive life. A condition could be something as obvious as being a female versus being a male, or poor versus being rich, old versus being young, rich versus being poor, or an entrepreneur or an executive. All of us have something in our life that can potentially hold us back and make us feel overwhelmed and that our life is out of control. Our challenge is to how to prevent the conditions from becoming the handicap. Tonight, I'm going to show you how we are co-creators of our own reality. In other words, I didn't say that we are the sole creators. We are the co-creators of our own reality. In other words, there are limitations in life. I am not some idealistic American motivational speaker who's going to come in here tonight and tell you that just everything is possible if you believe. Instead, I look at myself as a fellow traveler or an advisor, if you will. But tonight, I want to share with you how we do create our own realities, and we have the power to shape them. I want to share with you how, even in the midst of limitations, we can do this in our life. We can't control the weather. We can't change the economy. And I'll go so far as to say that you can't change other people. So this evening, I just want to speak about the one thing in life that you can change, and namely, that's yourself, ourselves. It's really the only thing we have the power to change. Yes, I was born without arms, but I created a disability. But more importantly, I want to show you how whatever reality that you have going on in your life, you have the power to create whatever reality it is that you want in your life too. Again, we do this not alone, but in a bigger context of the world. We need other people's help. That's one of the things that I love so much that Europeans understand over Americans, is that sense of interdependence, and how you help me, I help you, and together we do more. But reality looks like this. We, as human beings, make reality out of three basic things, three processes. Everything in life begins with our perceptions, how we see things. Those perceptions naturally lead to emotional reactions, what we do in response to how we see things. Over time, those emotional reactions get proceduralized, ritualized, and formalized into a way of being, or in other words, a practice. And it's at the intersection of our seeing, doing, and our being that we create reality. As a child, I felt loved and secure. I didn't really see myself as all that different. But when I went off to school for the first time, that's when I began to understand just how different I was. Up until that time, my family did a great job of making me feel loved and protected. But when I went off to school for the first time at about the age of 5 and saw all my peers dart out onto a playground and jump on the swings or play ball, all I could do was stand behind and start asking a lot of serious questions in life. And as I gazed out on that playground, I had one predominant perception of life. I was different. Of course, that put me into sort of an emotional spiral, a downward spiral of despair. Oh, I wish that I could have been out there with my peers, but I always came back to the fact that I was different. What if I went out there and I tried and I failed? The fear of failure kicked in. Or what if I went out there and I created a scene? The fear of embarrassment haunted me. Or what if I went out there and my peers just didn't want me around because I slowed them down? The fear of rejection haunted me. And it wasn't long before these fears began to fester. And combined with the loneliness and the isolation of feeling relegated to the sidelines, it's as though my mind went into a mental tailspin, that downward spiral of despair. And my motivation became non-existent, my self-esteem was low, my attitudes were negative. In school, I barely did what I had to do, and that's really all I did. And I continued to go through life like that for a long period of time. Oh, my parents tried to show me how other men with similar disabilities adapted their clothing to show that how I might be able to live more creatively, but I didn't want to listen to any of that. They helped me get artificial arms from the Shriners Hospital in St. Louis, and as you can see, I did have prosthetic arms, but these things were hot, they were heavy, and they were cumbersome, and they were a constant reminder to me that I was different, and I didn't like to wear them. So instead, I just kept going through life manipulating and conniving people to do things for me. When things got tough, I allowed other people to do things. I, after all, had the most perfect excuse. And I just went through life feeling sorry for myself and acting as a victim. My brothers would help me get dressed in the morning before going to school. They would meet up with me during the day to help me use the restroom. My friends would carry my food from the cafeteria line to the table. They would even wash my feet for me before I ate lunch. You see, I was creating my new reality. It began that when I thought that I was so different. Then it led to that emotional reaction, that downward spiral of despair. Over time, everybody became to know me as a little handicapped little victim. It got so bad that I became so dependent on people. At 10 years old, I created my own reality. The reality was called a disability. Now I was a small kid from a small town. Where was I going to go? This is a cyclical process that we live through in our life. And I'll show you this. You see, in everything in life, our mindset of what is happening creates our experience of what is happening. For me, I had this mindset of being disabled, which led to this perception that I'm different. That downward spiral of despair, I became dependent on other people. What happened at the end of the day? I became disabled. The mindset of what's happening creates the experience of what's happening. And this reality, have you ever noticed that sometimes you're in a reality that you don't want to be in and you wonder why you can't stop it? It's because this process is going on automatically. And unless you stop it, you can't create a new reality. The day finally came for me when I was 10 years old and in the 5th grade for it to stop. One day, this speaker came to our school and tried to sell us all on the idea of going off to a summer camp deep in the Shawnee National Forest in the tip of southern Illinois, right where the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers converge. Think about this. To a bunch of 10-year-old 5th grade boys, this sounded like an incredible adventure. A week in the woods, horseback riding, canoeing, hiking, fishing, swimming, no mom, no dad, no brothers, no sisters, we're out of here. And of course I wanted to go too. So that evening after school, I ran home and I asked my parents if I could go. Now I want to acknowledge that there is a very peculiar way that mothers think. Here I was, 10 years old, wanted to go spend a week in the woods, and I couldn't even get my pants up. Anyone want to guess what she said? No. No? What do you mean, no? At 10 years old, most kids think they have the worst moms in the world. Mine was confirming it. I have three older brothers, Bill, Joe, and Tom. They had been to this camp in previous years, and all my friends said they were going, and I really wanted to go too. But suddenly, my mom realized that, hey, John was growing up very quickly. And she knew that if I didn't start changing then, that I probably never would. She is a very wise woman. She understood that the mentality can create the identity if we're not careful. So that evening, she called a meeting with my father and all of my brothers. I mentioned to you earlier that I have three older brothers, Bill, Joe, and Tom. But what I haven't told you is that I also have four younger brothers, Ron, Jim, Patrick, and Paul. Yes, that's 8 sons. Now, if you're the parents of 8 kids, you might get a little busy. Constantly helping one of my brothers with homework, taking another one to ball practice, running me to the doctors, and somewhere in the midst of it, they just got tired of fighting with me. But that evening, my mom knew that she had an opportunity to teach me something. So her and my father called a meeting with all my brothers and sat them down and explained to them that things just had to change. The bribing, the sweet talking, the coaxing, showing me how other men with disabilities adapted their clothing, none of it was working. Now they were at the end of that proverbial rope, and they were going to practice something that we Americans call tough love. Tough love is a term that we often use in America to describe what we have to do for people that we love, even though they may not appreciate it or even understand it. For example, maybe when a child is reaching for a hot stove and a mother swats the hand away, the child gets upset. Even though he or she wants to do that, they don't appreciate it. Mother did it what was best. And they explained to my brothers that this was going to be tough. Why? Because John could get ugly. But because they loved me, they wanted me to live a fuller life. Now, my family had no idea what that meant or what that looked like. They just knew it had to be something better than this different, dependent, disabled thing that was running around the house making everybody's life miserable. So here was the plan. They told my brothers, no more help, none, until John starts taking some responsibility for himself to at least try to deal with his condition. If he can't get dressed tomorrow morning, fine, he won't go to school. And then they ended the meeting with a final charge. If we catch any of you helping him, you will be the one disciplined for it. Well, I didn't know this little meeting happened. Somehow I didn't get invited. The next morning I woke up and I went through my manipulative con game with my younger brother Ron. Ron and I shared a bedroom together, and he always did everything I told him to do. And that morning, like countless mornings before, he had grabbed my pants and started to hold them open for me to step into. And just as I was stepping my left leg into the pants, Ron jerked them back, and he seemed to be frozen. And I could tell he was torn between fear and compassion. Compassion for his brother, fear from his mother. I didn't understand what was going on. I just thought Ron was having a serious mental breakdown and needed a doctor. And I stormed off to confront my mom. Now, what I'm about to tell you is the first turning point in helping me deal with my condition and creating a new reality. It is not the only one. People ask me all the time, John, how have you overcome your condition? The truth is, I haven't. I am constantly living, growing, and struggling with this thing. I truly believe if any of us ever say that we have arrived, that we are there, that we are on top, that's the most dangerous position we can put ourselves in. Because it is in that precise moment of complacency that the winds of change tend to blow. So there I was, standing in the doorway of my bedroom that morning. Sweat was beating up on my forehead. My heart was starting to pound. And sitting on the corner of the bed in the side of the room was my mother. And with every belligerent, insulting word that a 10-year-old little boy knew, I let her have it. Why are you doing this to me? You don't love me. You're the worst mom in the world. Can't you see that I don't have any arms? I can't do this. You don't love me. And with everything that I threw at her, I was trying to make her feel guilty and push those buttons to make her feel guilty and change her mind. But she wouldn't do it. I look back on that now as an adult, and I can see that my words had to hurt her. But also in my words today cannot express enough appreciation and gratitude for what she had begun to do that day. What did she do? And why am I telling you all of this? What does what happened between me and my family so long ago have to do with all of you at this TEDx event here in Budapest? I believe it has to do with life and who you are and where you want to go, but most importantly, how you're going to get there. It has to do with tough love. But see, I'm not just talking about the traditional notion of tough love. I'm talking about the ultimate notion of it. The ultimate notion is not when someone tells you no or you even tell someone else no. But the ultimate definition of tough love is when you tell yourself no. No to the fear, no to the anxiety, no to the doubt, no to any of those emotional or mental things that are going to get in your way and cripple you from going and making the reality that you want for your life. That was the lesson that my mother wanted me to learn that day. That there was a beautiful world out there waiting for John. And the only person standing in his way was him. So she had younger children who needed her attention. She couldn't wait that maybe someday down the road John would just get it. She needed me to learn it that morning. And she got up off the bed, she walked out of the bedroom, and she closed the door behind her. Well, there I was, all alone in the room, completely naked. My pants were still laying there on the floor. It was pretty clear that the only way I was going to get out of that bedroom was if I tried to put those pants on. And you know, sometimes the first thing you need to do in life is usually the last thing that you want to do. And that was the last thing that I wanted to do that day because it was scary and I didn't know what kind of new reality laid on the other side. But I stepped my naked body into each pant leg, and then I laid down on the floor and put my feet up into the ears and jiggled the pants down to my legs, and then I stood up in a bow-legged squat with the pants stretched around my knees. I looked like a cowboy, just got off a horse in Texas. And I hobbled over to the dresser, and I thought, well, maybe I could snag the belt loop of the pants onto that knob on the dresser drawer. If I could just snag that belt loop on the knob, maybe I could squat and pull the pants up over each hip. Of course, I was a lot shorter then, but I eventually snagged the loop on the knob, and I pulled, but I pulled too hard, and the belt loop fell, and the belt loop ripped, and the pants fell to the floor. Now I was beginning to panic, so it was back on the floor again, feet up in the air. I was wiggling and jiggling to get the pants to move back down to my hips. I sweat very easily. And what happens when you sweat? Your skin gets clammy and sticky. So the more I'm wiggling and jiggling to get the pants to move, the more I'm sweating. The more I'm sweating, the more they're sticking. The more they're sticking, the more they're not moving. Clearly, this wasn't working. So I had to figure something else out. I scooted along the floor trying to get the pants on, and nothing was working. And I stood up, and by now I'm starting to work myself up into one heck of an ugly upset. And if you've ever been this mad or this scared, you know what I'm talking about. It's when your heart starts pounding and your blood starts pumping. And I felt a dryness in my throat. I could feel heat coming off the back of my neck. I felt like the whole room was closing in around me. I was trapped. And then there was all the emotions coming to me. I felt totally abandoned and absolutely rejected. Because I knew my family was on the other side of that door and could come in here and help, but nobody was doing it. And finally, I just fell to the floor in exhaustion. I was gasping and sobbing, snot and sweat and tears everywhere. It was the loneliest moment of my life. But somewhere in the midst of that silence, it was like I heard God say, you know, if you just shut up, I can help you here. And as I laid there on the floor, suddenly something happened. I had a new perception of my life. Remember I said everything begins with a perception? Suddenly I saw how stubborn I had been being. And I saw that this is where my negative attitudes, my low self-esteem had brought me to the floor, stripped not only of clothing, but every possible defense. I couldn't fight anymore. And then I started thinking about strong people, other people I knew with disabilities, who had worse conditions than I ever hoped to have. And I started thinking about how many of them talked out their problems. They thought creatively. They didn't make the condition mean something personal. They just picked up the broken pieces of their life and they moved forward. They didn't fight themselves. They fought their problem. And suddenly I realized that I had a choice to make. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to assert that every one of us in this room has that exact same choice to make. You see, there's people that don't have much of a choice of what they can do today. There's other people that don't have much of a choice on where they're going to go today. But every one of us has a choice in who we are going to be today. We can be loving, to be kind, to be resourceful, to be a team player, and the list goes on and on. It doesn't cost you any money. It doesn't take any time. That morning, I chose to be responsible, and I got up off that floor. Now, it didn't happen that day. It didn't happen that week. It didn't happen that month. But slowly, over time, I began to figure things out. In choosing to be responsible, I had to come up with more creative solutions in a day than many of you come up in a week just to get into this room here tonight in Budapest. You might notice that my shirt is tailored around the bottom. You see, when you don't have hands, you can't tuck your shirt tails into your pants. So my philosophy is, if it causes a problem, cut it off. You might notice that these socks are different. The big toe are separated. These come from Japan because in traditional Japanese dress, they wear a lot of thong sandals. Tabis allow me to have my feet covered, but use my toes. This is my watch. It's on my ankle. This is my wallet. This is a London Underground ticket holder from the London Underground. I keep my driver's license, credit cards, and dollar bills right here in the bottom of my shoe so I can get to it easily and quickly. I can't keep it in my back pocket. I give myself a hernia every time I reach for it. Those are some fast examples of the things that I've had to figure out in creating this new reality. Now let me give you an idea of what my life is like today. Today, several times a month, I'll pack my bags, I'll get in the car, drive to the airport in St. Louis, take off on an airplane in a different direction, somewhere around the world to deliver seminars and do coaching and facilitating with organizations. That means toting the heavy luggage through the airport on my own, getting this foot up on a high counter to check into a hotel room. I own my own home. If the garage door breaks or the furnace quits, I got to try to fix it with my feet. I get dressed myself. I'm an artist. I like to paint. I like to cook. I learned to snow ski in Austria. I've climbed all 272 steps of the Batu Cave. That's a Hindu temple that's built into a steep cliffside in Malaysia. I've snorkeled in the South China Sea, navigated the London, New York, and Paris subway systems on my own. I've written a book. I have my master's degree. I've met the Pope in the Vatican, and I'm married to a lovely, wonderful woman, and I have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our only real handicaps are the thoughts that blind us, the feelings that deafen us, and those old, tired excuses that paralyze us. If you can change those things, you can change your life. Thank you.